A common theory is that Nintendo will have a Switch successor reveal on the 8th of January. Does this track with what we know about Nintendo's past approach to Directs though? In this video, we will look at why the 8th of January is a good date to have a reveal, but in terms of revealing something as vast and consequential as a new console, there may be reasons for doubt. And in order to track this, let's start with the history of recent General Directs. With the exception of Shadow Drop games, Direct dates have never in the Switch era overlapped with a game release, and there tends to be a comfortable buffer either side. The September Directs are a bit of a cheat since they often come after the long summer break anyway, but the February and June Directs take pains to steer clear of first-party games either side as well. That said, we can look to the past and see the odd example where game releases and Directs were relatively close. The June 2003 General Direct was released 9 days before Luigi's Mansion 2 HD. The September 2023 Direct, which believe it or not was the last Direct prior to June, was 22 days before the next game, Detective Pikachu Returns. The June 2023 Direct was 9 days before Everybody Want to Switch. The February 2023 Direct was 16 days before Kirby Return to Dreamland Deluxe. Basically, they like to drop the Directs 1 to 3 weeks before a new game, although even then, there are examples of them going longer. The soonest they've dropped a Direct after a new game in recent years is Splatoon 3, which was followed by a General Direct just 4 days after. But in the case of this game, it made some sense as it's an online game requiring constant attention to keep it rolling. Generally, Directs follow a fairly long fallow period, usually several weeks, though in the case of the February 2022 Direct, it followed just 12 days after the release of Pokémon Legends Arceus. In this case, I think they probably needed it to run close to the release of the new game, as the Pokémon Presents announcing the Scarlet and Violet games was coming around the corner, and so they needed the General Direct to come first. There's also the September 2021 Direct, which was just 13 days after Wario Get It Together, but the overall trend is very much towards these announcements having a good amount of space either side. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have clocked onto the problem I'm identifying here. Donkey Kong Country Returns HD is coming out on the 16th of January. 8th of January is 8 days before. Conceivable as a date of choice for sure, but far tighter than Nintendo usually permits for their larger presentations. And any kind of Switch 2 reveal would be a very significant and consequential presentation, even if they literally do the bare minimum and drop a 3-minute trailer. Switch 2 rumours are obsessing the internet, but it would definitely split attention from Donkey Kong Country Returns HD. And if you think Nintendo doesn't really care about Donkey Kong Country Returns, think again. It may not be the biggest game ever, but it's still a franchise entry tying into their latest theme park attraction and featuring one of their core characters who they see as potentially having a big future. They are already issuing a decent number of advertisements for it online, and they are not going to want to smother the game out of the gate through thoughtless scheduling of their announcements. It would be pointless. Now, setting aside Switch 2 content, I don't think 8th of January will be too deadly for some kind of drop, but I think we can 90% rule out any major Direct presentation on the 15th itself or the couple of days either side. That would be far too close to Donkey Kong Country Returns. That said, even the 8th of January does feel tight, although there is precedent, of course, with the June 2024 Direct being just 9 days before Luigi's Mansion 2 HD. On the other hand, if they wait a couple of weeks after, also time to clear the American inauguration, they have a much clearer run. Currently, there is no February game scheduled, although I do expect that to come. And while they have events at the beginning of February, their investor meeting at the end of February Pokemon Day, and in early March for Mario Day, their next scheduled game is Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition in March. I just don't see the advantage to rushing out an announcement while the wrapping paper for millions of new Switches is still in the recycling bin. Of course, it's impossible to be certain, but I think 70% there will not be a Switch 2 reveal on the week of the 8th. That said, I don't rule out Nintendo dropping key information on this date, possibly for something else. We have seen, particularly with the sequence of Nintendo's recent social media drops, a specific kind of pattern. Alamo, Xenoblade Chronicles X, and the playtest game showed the way they like to roll with a sequencing that builds their reveals up when they have a few different things to promote. And basically they like to start small and build progressively up. That is perfectly logical because you want to capture attention with early announcements, and then when you have people's attention, hit them with the bigger stuff. Often weeks contain more than one reveal during busy periods. You can bet that Nintendo will have things they want to drop in early January, from Nintendo Music updates and possibly those vital Nintendo Switch Online new games to keep people invested, through to things like details of the February Nintendo Switch game, which is almost certain, I think 90% to come, but currently remains a big vacuous mystery. All of which makes me feel like an 8th of January release is a little bit too early, probably to launch a new console. I don't think they're likely to worry overly much about leaks. Leaks at this point, assuming they're accurate, were always going to be an inevitability and really only reach a relatively small audience. However, their launch announcement is firing the starting gun on all sorts of crazy stuff, and they need all their I's dotted and all their T's crossed in a major way before they get going. Looking back across all their directs, presentations, indies, minis, the works, the average time since an announcement or game and the average time before a new announcement or game is around 12 days. Also recall that Donkey Kong Country Returns HD is being scheduled relatively early in the year for a game release. Not as early as New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe in 2019, which came out the second week of the year. This is closer to the pattern of Tokyo Mirage Sessions, Another Code Recollection, and Fire Emblem Engage in 2020, 2023, and 2024 respectively. Now, Tokyo Mirage Sessions did follow a day after a Super Smash Bros. Ultimate presentation, but I suspect they feel the overlap between those audiences might be relatively low, and in any event, these game-specific presentations tend to be the type they are slightly more flexible about scheduling than the general all-encompassing types of direct. Engage and Another Code Recollection came after very substantial lulls on the other hand. Now that's not to say that an early drop is without precedent. The 11th of January 2018 had a Direct Mini which contained a lot of information about the Switch games for the first half of 2018. At this point, it seems unlikely that they are going to want to do a Direct Mini for announcements of proper Switch games, of which they must have quite a few to still push forward. Thinking about how they organise their scheduling with smaller announcements first, I could definitely see a direct early on dedicated to the Switch 1, or else just a series of smaller social media drops early on to clear the palette for a more substantial announcement relating to the Switch 2 later on in the quarter. Incidentally, this investigation also suggests that it's very unlikely we'll get a general indie or partner showcase in March after the first couple of weeks, given that they will want to clear hype space for Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition. I think we can 90% guarantee, though, that there will be a Mario Day presentation of some description, and I'd also go for 90% for a Pokemon Presents on Pokemon Day, as this has become such a recent tradition. So, extrapolating backwards, that gives us a large halo around these dates where we're unlikely to see a lot else. I do think it's likely that we will have a February game, as I've said, and that would suggest a 13th of February likely release slot. Clear enough of Pokemon ahead of it, and then go back 2 weeks from there and we have, 28th of January. Okay, yes, it fits my pre-existing theory, but I still think the logic works for Nintendo to do their big announcement on the 28th of January, which is also, of course, the week before their investor Q&A and financial presentation. Their first 2 full weeks of the quarter end with the release of Donkey Kong Country Return HD. Then they leave just shy of 2 weeks and go for their big system reveal. The next week is the financial results. Then the next week they have a February game. 2 weeks later Pokemon Day. 2 weeks later Mario Day. 2 weeks later Xenoblade Chronicles X. 3 games, several key presentations, evenly spaced out to make sure that none of them are cannibalizing the attention of the others. Granted, the big thing in this case that's missing is a space to announce the February game, and there is one alternative scenario that I could see working very well for them. Drop some news during the first full week in January, Nintendo Music maybe, but nothing absolutely huge. Announce the Switch 2 on, let's say, 28th or 29th of January, Then say either in this presentation or in the financial meeting, mention that details will follow in a Nintendo Direct in February. Hype the living daylights out of that Direct, and in that Direct go absolutely huge on, ta-da, the Switch 1, because they really want to show that they are continuing to put their shoulder to the wheel behind their surefire install base. This could then include a Shadow Drop game, which might then have a physical release early March. In fact, this was the exact pattern of Metroid Prime Remastered, which worked out well for them, and perhaps could indicate that Metroid Prime Remastered 2, or at least an HD version of Metroid Prime 2, could be on the way. Perhaps this makes the most sense as a plausible scenario, and it will become increasingly likely, I feel, if they do not reveal a February game in a social media drop by about the 9th of January, but we will reassess these likelihoods closer to the time. At any rate, they then have the chance to do a deep dive on the Switch 2 over the coming months, as I'm sure they will. I know a lot of people are expecting a Switch 2 specific presentation like January 2017, and that may well happen, but I think this is a very different proposition for Nintendo compared to the launch of the original Switch. The watchword here is clearly continuity, and they are not going to want existing Switch owners who don't plan to upgrade immediately to feel alienated. Besides, they'd be mad to pass up selling titles to their vast Switch install base in the interim. Okay, that's it for today, but more videos are pinging their way onto the screen right now. The Patreon link is below with lots of awesome stuff afoot for the coming year. Thanks for liking, commenting, sharing, subscribing, and I shall see you next time for another Nintendo Forecast.